Leo Roberts died in the winter, a quiet, medically assisted passing in Vermont. He never told me, just flew out to a quiet clinic nestled in the snow-covered mountains by himself. The night before he left, his eyes were shot through with a desperate crimson as he held me down, a frantic attempt to merge our bodies into one before the dawn broke. When I couldn't take it anymore and cursed him, my nails left angry red crescents on his back. He didn't seem to feel it, his only focus a primal need for connection. The next morning, a soft kiss on my forehead. He whispered that he was leaving, and I, thinking he meant for the office, irritably told him to get on with it. 2 days later, a lawyer arrived with his last will and testament. He had stomach cancer. I never had a clue. The lawyer handed me the document, a single, sterile sheet of paper. I scanned it again and again, the crisp vellum feeling alien in my hands. There was nothing to decipher, no hidden message. Just one line, stark and absolute. The entire estate of Ethan Cole was to be transferred to Leo Roberts. I asked nonchalantly if there was anything else. The lawyer shook his head but added that Mr. Cole had requested his final resting place be in Vermont. Buried in Vermont. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. In 5 years, communication between us had been sparse, mostly transactional, conducted in the tangled sheets of our bed. He never listened to me then. When I begged him to stop, he was deaf to my pleas. When I told him to get out, he remained a silent, unmovable force. It was ironic that the one time I'd screamed at him to go die somewhere else, he had finally obeyed. I told the lawyer that particular detail was unnecessary. I tossed the will onto the mahogany desk, remarking that he could be buried wherever he pleased. After my own company had spectacularly imploded, inheriting a fortune felt like a delusion. It was so surreal that I kept expecting Ethan to emerge from some shadow, observing my reaction with that unnerving stillness of his. So I tempered my relief, terrified that if he sensed my joy, he'd materialize and pin me to the mattress once more. The feeling of being watched didn't dissipate until I was on a plane to Vermont, standing in a small, wood-paneled chapel, looking at his body. The funeral was profoundly simple. I was the sole attendee, the inheritor of his life's work. Lying in the dark wood of the casket, Ethan's face was serene, almost peaceful. I leaned over, a morbid curiosity compelling me to check for breath, to press my hand against the starched white shirt over his chest. Nothing. No air, no pulse. Still, a sliver of suspicion remained. I pinched his cheek, pulling the skin. It was real. Ethan Cole was truly gone. I told his still face that this is what happens when you keep secrets. I patted his cheek, a genuine, unburdened smile spreading across my face. But I conceded, for leaving me everything, I could at least see him settled into the earth. It was deep winter there, a fresh blanket of snow muffling the world. The powder crunched under my boots with a satisfying squeak. I despised the cold, so I was bundled in layers, only my eyes exposed to the biting air as I watched the workers lower the coffin into the waiting earth. The thud of it landing was final. They filled the grave, the dark soil a stark wound against the pristine snow. Paid for their services, they departed, leaving me alone with the freshly turned plot. I stood there, staring at the dark patch of ground, my mind as frozen as the landscape. I'd forgotten what I was supposed to do next. It wasn't until delicate snowflakes began to fall again, dusting the raw earth with a fine layer of white, that I came back to myself. It was so cold that ice crystals formed on my eyelashes. I blew on my numb fingers and turned away. I had a lot of work to do. Back in Chicago, I was consumed. Legacy transfers, corporate restructuring, board meetings. The days were a blur of paperwork and legalese. I was so exhausted that sleep came the moment my head hit the pillow. No sleeping pills required. But once the chaos subsided and the empire was mine to command, a quiet stability set in. And the insomnia returned. Lying in bed at 10 o'clock, sleep was a distant country. I wondered if I was simply unused to sleeping alone. My eyes felt dry and gritty as I considered how pathetic I was. For years I'd complained about his presence, and now his absence was the problem. Unable to rest, I sat up and emptied the bottle of pills from the nightstand. 10 left. This wasn't a suicide attempt. The penthouse was just too large, too silent, and I was profoundly bored. I arranged the small white tablets on the bedside table, selecting 2 that looked agreeable and pushing the rest back into the bottle. I washed them down with water. The drowsiness was swift. I closed my eyes, and when they opened again, an 18-year-old Ethan Cole was standing before me. The realization that I had been thrown back in time hit me with a wave of caustic amusement. I had finally outlived him, only to be haunted by his younger self in a new life. This version of Ethan was thinner than I remembered, his frame lost in a generic sky blue high school uniform. He stood with his head bowed, the picture of a meek, pitiable scholarship case. Seeing him like this for the first time, so vulnerable, I found myself studying him with a detached fascination. His principal sat across from me, discussing the details of my philanthropic sponsorship. He praised Ethan's academic excellence and stellar character. It was so absurd I nearly laughed out loud. If Ethan truly had character, he would have helped me unconditionally when my world collapsed, not used my desperation as leverage for his own desires. The memory sent a sharp pain through my temples. I rubbed them, my voice tight with irritation as I asked if there were other candidates. The principal was taken aback, confused by my sudden change of heart after our initial positive discussion. But he was a pragmatist. He quickly produced the file of another student, a girl, and offered to have her brought in. I waved a dismissive hand, telling him it wasn't necessary. Anyone but Ethan Cole. The name was settled. Ethan remained silent, never once trying to plead his case. As he turned to leave, he finally lifted his head and his eyes met mine for a fleeting second. I felt an inexplicable knot tighten in my chest, a feeling I wanted to escape. I left the school quickly. My driver, Mark, was waiting. He had been with me through the bankruptcy, a loyal soldier in a losing war, before the final collapse forced him back to his rural hometown. Settling into the familiar leather seat, a craving for a cigarette hit me, sharp and sudden. I searched my pockets, but they were empty. I asked Mark if he had one. He gave me a strange look and reminded me that I didn't smoke. Of course, 10 years ago, the habit hadn't yet taken hold. 10 years ago, the words felt like a gift. Nothing had happened yet. Everything could be changed. With a newfound clarity, I told Mark to take us back to the office. We were caught in the after-school traffic, a sea of students flooding the streets. As our car crept forward, my gaze fell on a familiar figure. 18-year-old Ethan, huddled under an awning, eating a plain bagel with a cup of water from a thermos. The bagel shop next to him sold them for $1 apiece. He ate slowly, his head down, his long, pale fingers even whiter than the bread he was holding. Perhaps my stare was too intense, because he looked up, his eyes seeming to meet mine through the tinted glass. He couldn't see me, but I saw him. He stared at the dark window for a moment before returning to his meager meal. Stomach cancer. The thought pierced through me. I suddenly understood. The traffic began to clear. Mark accelerated, murmuring that we'd be past the congestion after the next light. I told him to turn the car around. He looked confused but did as he was told, looping back to where we started. Ethan was still there. He had finished the first bagel and, driven by a hunger that defied his usual self-control, had bought another. It was meant to be his breakfast for the next day. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb beside him. Mark recognized him, asking if that wasn't the student I was sponsoring. I didn't correct him. I just lowered the window and gave a cold command for him to get in. Ethan froze for a second, then stuffed the remaining half of the bagel into his pocket and climbed into the car. My mother always said I was too soft-hearted, that it would be my downfall. She was right. That's why my company failed. That's why I ended up entangled with a predator like Ethan Cole. After a brief call to his principal, I took him to my company headquarters. We produced components for electric vehicles, a burgeoning industry that was still a decade away from hitting the mainstream. Seated at my old desk, the space both strange and intimately familiar, I ordered a proper meal for Ethan and dove into my work. The knowledge, thankfully, had not been lost with time. I immersed myself in files and projections, the rhythm of the work a comforting balm. Ethan sat quietly to the side, eating a meal of roasted chicken, steamed broccoli, and a rich corn chowder. He ate methodically, finishing everything. As he drank the last of the soup, his gaze flickered over to me before quickly darting away. Then, seeing me completely absorbed, he began to watch me openly. I could almost feel his eyes tracing the lines of my face. I worked late into the night. When I finally finished, stretching my stiff muscles, I glanced at the clock. It was past 11. Ethan had sat there the entire time, a silent sentinel. He hadn't asked why I'd brought him, and I hadn't explained. A strange, unspoken understanding hung between us. Mark had already gone home, so I drove. As Ethan reached for the passenger door handle, he spoke to me for the first time that day. His voice was clear and melodic, with the distinct timbre of late adolescence. He told me his address, a place I knew was in one of the city's most impoverished neighborhoods. I didn't respond, just pulled away from the curb and drove him back to my penthouse. Inside, I finally turned to him. I heard he was an orphan. He gave a slight nod. A cruel smile played on my lips. "Good," I said. "From now on, I'm your dad." I was 24 to his 18. The 6-year gap made the proposition absurd, but I told him to call me Dad. I was prepared for resistance, ready to enforce my will, but to my surprise, he accepted it without a fight. His dark eyes were unreadable as he looked at me and asked which room was his. A flicker of disappointment went through me. I had been expecting to break the spirit of a proud scholar, but Ethan was disconcertingly adaptable. I pointed him to a guest room at the far end of the hall, as far from my own as possible, and told him not to bother me. He simply nodded and disappeared. It was late. I showered and got into bed, but the old affliction was back. I tossed and turned, sleep an elusive ghost. I reached for the nightstand, my fingers searching for the familiar little bottle, intending to chew a couple of pills dry. But there was nothing, right? 10 years ago, I didn't need them. I groaned in frustration. The silence of the night was deafening. Lying there with my eyes open, my mind raced, replaying the betrayals, the bankruptcy, the humiliation of being at his mercy. And then the final, baffling insult of the inheritance he'd left me. A fortune I hadn't even had the chance to spend. The thought made me angrier. Sleep now an impossibility. I grabbed a pillow, slipped on my house shoes, and marched to Ethan's room. The light was off, but I didn't care if he was asleep. I flipped the switch, flooding the room with light. "Get up," I commanded, my voice dripping with arrogance. He wasn't asleep. He sat up slowly, his expression calm. He asked what was wrong, his voice gentle. Not a hint of anger. The 18-year-old Ethan had the patience of a saint, which, bizarrely, made me feel a flicker of guilt. It lasted for a fraction of a second. Whatever this boy hadn't done yet, his future self was guilty of, and that was enough for me. I threw myself onto his bed and thrust a book into his hands. "I'm trying to sleep. Read me a story." He fumbled with the thick, worn volume of classic fairy tales. The book was heavy, its edges frayed from years of use, a testament to how much I'd cherished it as a child. He noted its condition, a hint of surprise in his voice as he asked if I liked the book. I cut him off, telling him to stop asking questions and just read. What he mumbled next was too quiet for me to hear, and I didn't bother asking him to repeat it. An adult man whose favorite bedtime reading was a book of fairy tales wasn't exactly a dignified image. My abrasive manner drew a quiet, almost imperceptible smile from him. He didn't press the issue. He turned off the main light, leaving only the soft, amber glow of the bedside lamp. He pulled a chair close to the bed. He asked if I was ready. I grunted in affirmation. "All right, I'll start from the beginning," he said, his voice a soothing balm. "Once upon a time, in a deep, dark forest, there lived a big, gray wolf." The young man's crisp narration had a hypnotic quality, and my eyelids grew heavy. The anxieties that had been churning in my mind receded, silenced by the simple tale. But as I drifted closer to sleep, a familiar, nameless dread began to creep in from the edges. "Ethan," I murmured, my voice thick with sleep. "I'm here," came the steady reply. The assurance was all I needed. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. His voice softened, trailing off. I felt him lean over, the book closing with a soft rustle, and then the light pressure of a kiss on my forehead. "Good night, Leo. Sweet dreams." I woke up drenched in sweat from a nightmare. I touched my face. The tears were still damp on my skin. I couldn't remember the dream, only the visceral terror of something I was desperate to prevent. I sat up, disoriented. The room was dark. A jolt of panic shot through me. Had I reborn at all? Maybe this was still the future, the first month after Ethan's death. Was my fear born from his absence, or from my failure to bring the people who ruined me to justice? Couldn't tell. All I knew was the profound cold that seeped into my bones. The bed was empty. It was just me, alone, like in that final winter after he was gone. But last night, I was in Ethan's room. Was that the dream? "Ethan?" I called out, my voice raw with a desperate hope. "Are you there?" "I'm always here." The response came from the darkness, a calm anchor in my panic. He switched on the bedside lamp. The warm light illuminated his handsome features. He was still sitting in that uncomfortable-looking chair, his bright eyes watching me. There were faint, bluish shadows beneath them. He obviously hadn't slept well. My throat felt dry. I asked him why he didn't sleep in the bed. He shrugged it off, saying the bed was too small and he didn't want to disturb me. I looked at the single bed beneath me. It was narrow, but it could fit 2 men, especially since Ethan's frame was still slight from years of inadequate nutrition. A complicated emotion stirred within me. I told him he didn't have to do that. That from now on, after I fell asleep, he could get in the bed with me. He looked at me, his expression serious, and asked if I was sure he could sleep with me. I was. The penthouse had plenty of rooms, but I didn't mention it. Perhaps I also needed someone to share the dark with. After dropping Ethan at school, I drove to the office. The season was shifting toward winter, the nights growing longer. At 7 in the morning, the sky was still a hazy gray, the streetlights casting lonely pools of orange on the empty roads. It felt no different from the drives I'd made years in the future, shuttling between my home and what was then Ethan's company. But this time, there was a weight in my chest that felt like purpose, a force that turned the solitude into a state of serene focus. The office was mostly empty. I walked through the quiet workspace to my office. This building wasn't truly mine yet. It was my father's. After he and my mother died in a car crash, it became my first inheritance. A bitter smile touched my lips. It was as if some wicked fairy had cursed me at birth to a life of inheriting the possessions of the dead. I was only 20 when they died. My uncle managed the company for 2 years until I was ready to take over, at which point he took charge of a subsidiary. He was my only remaining family. My parents had trusted him implicitly, and so did I. That's why his betrayal had cut so deep. The subsidiary he ran had started cutting corners, using cheaper, substandard materials to line his own pockets. Over a few years, they produced tens of thousands of faulty products that flooded the market. They were ticking time bombs, and inevitably, they started to explode. News of my company's cars spontaneously combusting spread like wildfire. My attempts at damage control were futile. Lawsuits piled up. As if that weren't enough, our core proprietary data was stolen and sold to a competitor. I was completely wiped out, saddled with millions in debt. I was not a person of great fortitude. The responsibility was crushing. Within a month of the bankruptcy, I gave up. I took a fruit knife to the bathtub. But my luck was terrible that day. Mark found me. I was saved, but the cut had been deep, leaving a jagged scar on my right wrist that ached on rainy days, a physical reminder of my darkest hour. The doctors diagnosed me with severe depression. They said my will to live was weak. Mark stayed with me for a few days, his eyes always red-rimmed, but my condition didn't improve. Eventually, he left for home. I didn't blame him. I felt guilty for wasting his years of hard work. The day he left, I went out and bought a new knife. But before the tub could fill, Ethan arrived. He took the knife from my hand and made me an offer. He would pay off my debts if I went home with him. He bought my freedom and my body with it. Thinking of him, I lifted my right hand. The skin was smooth, unblemished. I never understood why the future Ethan had a fascination with that scar. After his fierce, almost violent lovemaking, when I was boneless with exhaustion, he would take my hand and press soft, slow kisses along the angry red line. His warm breath on my skin was always faintly ticklish. Now that I thought about it, my wrist rarely hurt during those years. Or maybe it had, and I'd just forgotten. The idea that his kisses had some kind of healing power was absurd, and I immediately dismissed it. I scoffed at myself for even entertaining such a sentimental thought. On my first full day reborn, I went to see Molly. My uncle had introduced us, and at this point we'd been dating for a year. The younger me had naively accepted her, made her my fiancée, never suspecting she was working with my uncle to steal company secrets. Today, I proposed we move in together. Molly was ecstatic. My plan was simple. It's far easier to defend against an enemy you can watch. I was so consumed with my plans for revenge that I forgot one crucial detail. When I brought Molly back to the penthouse, Ethan was there. He froze. I felt a strange and unwelcome awkwardness, the way one might feel introducing a new partner to an ex. But that was ridiculous. This Ethan and I had no history. I told myself this as I introduced her as my fiancée, Molly. The word fiancé made Ethan's thin lips press into a hard line. He had investigated me thoroughly in our past life. He knew all about Molly. He understood exactly why I was bringing her here now. But an involuntary flash of jealousy still darkened his face before he smoothed it into a polite mask. He greeted her courteously. Molly, her arm linked through mine, looked at the strange boy in my home with open curiosity. She asked who he was. Explaining Ethan's presence was tricky. Saying he was a student I sponsored wouldn't explain why he was living with me. So I told the truth, or a version of it. I told her he was my adopted son. Molly was momentarily stunned, likely wondering why a 24-year-old would adopt a son. But she didn't press the issue. Instead, she cheerfully suggested that if he was my son, then she must be his mother. The idea was repellent. I deflected, telling her we could talk about that later. She wisely dropped it. As my fiancée, Molly naturally expected to share my room. But I was a traditionalist, believing certain things should wait for marriage. That was true for my younger self, and the older, more jaded version of me had even less interest in romance. While Molly showered, I was on the sofa downstairs, scrolling through my phone, when Ethan approached. He asked, his voice carefully neutral, if I needed him to read to me tonight. The offer was so out of place that I sat up, studying his face again. His expression was flawless, a simple question with no hidden meaning. I told him, my voice slow and deliberate, that the one thing I despised most in this world was being lied to. He didn't react, his face a calm, attentive mask, his dark eyes fixed on me like a perfect listener. So I continued, telling him about a person who had done something terrible to me, who had hidden something very important. I hated that person. I asked him what he thought I should do. For the first time, he showed a flicker of a reaction. He considered the question for a moment. Then he said I should make that person get as far away from me as possible. I let out a short, sharp laugh. He was nothing if not consistent. Isn't that exactly what the future him did? Ran as far away as Vermont, a full day of travel just to reach him. I nodded in agreement, but then posed another question. What if that person has shown up again? Ethan fell silent. Perhaps the question was too difficult. After a long pause, he asked cautiously what I planned to do. I shrugged. I told him I didn't know, which was why I was asking him. Since he didn't have an answer either, I supposed it didn't matter. His silence stretched until I got up to leave. A pang of disappointment hit me. I wasn't even sure what I was trying to prove with these tests. What difference did it make if he was the Ethan from the future or not? What would I do? Beat him up? It was childish. I had Molly with me tonight. I might need company, but not just any company would do. Lying awake, I thought about why the future Ethan chose to be buried in Vermont. Maybe he felt guilty. The day he came for me, the bathtub was half full of water. I was just waiting. I barely remembered him from the scholarship program. He was just one of many kids I'd helped. When he burst in, I thought he was a debt collector. I grabbed the knife, ready to end it, but he caught my wrist. He said he would help me pay off my debts if I just came with him. I was desperate enough to agree. I thought it was a return on a past kindness. I never imagined he had been coveting me for years. The moonlight streamed through the window. I had been so busy today I'd forgotten to buy more sleeping pills. I slipped out of bed and, for reasons I didn't understand, found myself outside Ethan's door. I pushed it open. The moonlight was bright enough that I didn't need to turn on a light. He was sleeping peacefully. He hadn't slept well the night before. I didn't want to disturb him. I tiptoed to his bed and sat in the chair he had occupied. He slept so still, flat on his back, hands crossed over his chest. It was the same pose he held in his coffin. The image made my heart stutter with a sudden, inexplicable panic. I reached out and felt for his breath. A steady, gentle puff of air against my fingertips calmed my racing pulse. I gently squeezed his cheek. He didn't stir. I took his crossed hands and unlaced his fingers. This was his right hand. The palm was smooth with only 3 clear lines. There was no pale, pinkish scar tissue from a self-inflicted wound. It was as if those dark years had been erased. I couldn't tell if the feeling in my chest was relief or sadness. I laced my fingers with his. You know, Ethan, I whispered to the sleeping boy, I really hate you. I paused. Did you ask my permission before leaving me your entire fortune? Do you have any idea how much work it was sorting out your company for a month? I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. The memory made me indignant. Why didn't you help me? Just because you were dead? That's a terrible excuse. And did you ask my permission to die? From now on, you're not allowed to die without my permission. Got it? He remained silent, his breathing even. I'll take your silence as a yes, I said, a smile spreading in the dark. I talked for a while longer, a rambling, one-sided conversation, until my own eyelids began to droop. The wave of sleepiness was welcome. Without a second thought, I climbed into the narrow bed beside him. Good night, I murmured, and closed my eyes. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed. Molly was sleeping beside me. For a long moment, I was disoriented. Was last night another dream? I'd had so many. The lines between reality and nightmare had blurred. But last night felt so real. Could a dream have such a tangible texture? I opened my hand, trying to recall the feeling of his fingers intertwined with mine. The sensation was so vivid I could almost still feel his warmth. Only one person knew the truth. On the drive to school, I struggled with how to ask him. The words wouldn't come. Admitting I snuck into his room in the middle of the night just to sleep next to him sounded perverse. I couldn't bring myself to say it. It wasn't until he got out of the car that I forced myself to call his name. He stopped and looked at me, his expression calm and patient. I hesitated. Did you sleep well last night? Very well, he said, his gaze sincere. I haven't slept that peacefully in a long time. His answer told me nothing. I managed a weak laugh and told him to have a good day at school. From his placid demeanor, I could glean nothing. I decided to let it go. At the office, Mark had already compiled the report on the defects at my uncle's subsidiary. The production of the faulty components had begun, but thankfully, they hadn't reached a mass market scale yet. I called a board meeting and laid out the evidence. My uncle's face went pale. He had no idea why I had suddenly decided to investigate him. In his eyes, I was just an easy-to-manipulate kid who valued family above all else. He tried to deflect, blaming his subordinates, promising to find the culprit. I told him I believed him. His face brightened. But I continued, the fact that this happened under his management proved a lack of oversight. I suggested it was time for someone else to run the subsidiary. The board members, all seasoned veterans who knew exactly what my uncle was up to, readily supported the motion. They understood the catastrophic damage this could do to the company's reputation. My uncle's expression hardened. "You've grown up, Leo," he said, his voice cold. He declared that if his advice was no longer welcome, he would wash his hands of my company's operations. I had grown up. In my past life, other board members had warned me about him, but I had been too naive to listen. Experience is a brutal teacher. I gave a slight nod and told him that would be for the best. When Molly heard, she came to me in tears, professing her ignorance of her uncle's schemes and begging me not to let it affect our relationship. I reassured her it wouldn't. After all, her role in this was far more critical. With the board's support, I systematically stripped my uncle of all his power, using his personal assets to cover the losses from the defective products. He called me, screaming, asking if I was trying to ruin him. I said nothing. When he had pushed me off that cliff 10 years ago, had he considered my fate? My silence enraged him further. "You remember this, Leo," he snarled. "Even a cornered dog will bite back. You'd better be ready for the consequences." He hung up. On my computer monitor, a live feed from a hidden camera showed Molly slipping into my study and placing a call to my uncle. I smiled faintly. The consequences I couldn't handle in my last life were about to boomerang back to their source. Their downfall was swift. My uncle, familiar with the subsidiary's finances, embezzled a large sum of money. Then they sold the stolen proprietary data, which I had already replaced with cleverly disguised but useless information, to our competitor and prepared to flee the country. I already had a team waiting for them at the airport. Their crimes were serious, and with pressure from both my company and the competitor they had swindled, they received the maximum sentence. Walking out of the courthouse, the weight of years of resentment finally lifted from my shoulders. As if to celebrate my rebirth, snow began to fall. The first snow of the year. I held out my hand, and a single perfect snowflake landed in my palm, melting into a tiny, crystalline tear. It struck me then that every major turning point in my life seemed to happen in winter. Ethan appeared at my side, holding an umbrella over my head. He saw me staring at the snow, lost in thought, and gently reminded me that it was getting cold and we should go home. The cold seemed to materialize all at once, sharp and biting. I pulled my wool coat tighter. I said, the thought disconnected from everything. It was snowing just like this the day he left. Ethan's lips thinned, but he said nothing. His knuckles were white where he gripped the umbrella handle. I didn't notice his reaction, lost in my own memories. The winter in Vermont was so cold. I murmured. He stayed there all alone. He was so cruel. He knew how much I hate the cold, but he wouldn't even stay and keep me company. I sniffled, the cold air making my nose run. But he was good to me, too. He left me so much money. Do you think he knew I couldn't manage a company that big? Why would he trust me with it? Leo, it's over. Ethan's voice cut through my reverie. He repeated it more firmly. It's all over. Forget him. I looked up at him then, really looked at his face. It was as calm and serene as ever. He was right. I should forget. Like the scar on my wrist and the one on his palm that no longer existed. The scars were gone. It was time to move forward. I blinked at him, Don't call me Dad anymore, I said. Call me Leo. Ethan's throat seemed to tighten. His voice was trembling slightly as he managed a quiet okay. I turned my gaze back to the swirling snow. It's so cold, Ethan. I don't want to spend another winter alone. He looked down and his hand covered mine. His palm was warm as it had always been. His voice was gentle, but full of an unwavering certainty. It's okay, Leo. I'll always be with you,